Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our journey through one of the most devastating chapters in human history, the Black Death. The story of the Black Death begins in 1347, when a fleet of Genoese trading ships arrived at the Sicilian port of Messina. The sailors aboard were gravely ill, and within days the plague began to spread like wildfire through the city and beyond. It likely originated in Central Asia and traveled along the Silk Road, eventually making its way to Europe via trade routes. This microscopic killer would soon ravage the continent, altering the course of history forever. The Black Death was caused by a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, transmitted primarily through fleas that lived on black rats. However, it wasn't limited to rats. The disease spread through various means, including direct contact and airborne droplets during its pneumonic form. It took three main forms. 1. Bubonic plague, the most common form, with symptoms including fever, vomiting, and swollen, blackened lymph nodes called buboes. 2. Pneumonic plague, a respiratory form that spread through coughing and sneezing. 3. Septicemic plague, a rarer, blood-borne version that was almost always fatal. While Europe is often the focus of the Black Death, the pandemic also devastated parts of Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East. Cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus saw massive losses of life. In China, some regions experienced catastrophic mortality rates, leading to population declines that took centuries to recover. Trade routes that once facilitated the exchange of goods and ideas became pathways for the disease, spreading it far and wide. Imagine waking up every day to the sound of church bells tolling for the dead. People burned incense, thinking it could purify the air. Some even carried herbs or flowers to combat the poisonous vapors they believed caused the disease. In an attempt to stop the spread, authorities often resorted to cruel and ineffective measures. Entire families were walled into their homes and left to die. Ships arriving at ports were sometimes burned with all aboard if there was suspicion of infection. Quarantines were imposed, with some towns and cities completely isolating themselves, even if it meant abandoning those in need. Victims were sometimes accused of witchcraft or heresy, and minorities like Jews were falsely blamed, leading to violent massacres. The streets of cities became eerily empty, save for the plague doctors in their distinctive attire. These doctors wore long, dark robes made of waxed fabric to repel bodily fluids. Their iconic beaked masks were stuffed with aromatic herbs, spices, or vinegar-soaked cloth, believed to protect them from the miasma, the bad air thought to spread the disease. These outfits, though frightening, symbolized an early attempt at personal protective equipment. The societal effects were profound. Families abandoned loved ones. Mass graves were dug to bury the countless dead. Religious extremism surged. Some turned to prayer and penance, believing the plague was divine punishment. The flagellants, for instance, were groups of people who roamed towns, whipping themselves to atone for humanity's sins. The massive loss of life had profound economic, social, and cultural consequences. Labor shortages meant that peasants could demand higher wages, weakening the feudal system and giving rise to a more mobile workforce. Entire landscapes changed as farmland was abandoned and returned to forests. The church, once a central pillar of medieval life, faced significant challenges. Its inability to explain or stop the plague shook people's faith in religious authorities. This laid the groundwork for later movements like the Protestant Reformation. On a cultural level, the Black Death inspired a new preoccupation with death and mortality. This is evident in art and literature from the period. The dance macabre, or dance of death, became a recurring theme, reminding people that death spares no one, rich or poor, young or old. Though the Black Death occurred over 600 years ago, its story remains incredibly relevant. It teaches us about the fragility of human societies in the face of pandemics and the importance of science, public health, and cooperation. Today, diseases like COVID-19 remind us that humanity is still vulnerable. However, unlike the people of the 14th century, we have the advantage of modern medicine, vaccines, and global communication to mitigate the effects of pandemics. The Black Death was a dark chapter, but it also reshaped humanity in profound ways. It tested the limits of human resilience, forced societies to adapt, and even sparked changes that would eventually lead to the modern era. As we reflect on this tragic but transformative period, we're reminded of humanity's enduring capacity to rebuild and innovate in the face of catastrophe.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.